Welcome to Snail Story, where every tale is a quiet breath, a gentle slice of love, kindness, and the simple good that still exists in everyday life. Today, we follow the journey of a 13-year-old girl, Ellie. She walked into the bank with hopeful eyes, just wanting to open her very first account. But instead of being welcomed, Ellie was doubted, humiliated, and eventually handcuffed under the indifferent gaze of everyone around her simply because of the color of her skin. But what they didn't know was who Ellie's mother was, and her mother, powerful woman who chose to live quietly, walked in, not to seek revenge, but to right the wrongs that had been passed down for generations. This is a story of injustice, yes, but more than that, it is a story of trust, courage, and how one small girl made an entire system stop and change. If you believe that every child deserves respect regardless of skin color, age, or background, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel to follow more heartfelt stories, and share it with someone you care about. Because who knows, someone out there might need to hear a story like this today. On Monday afternoon, the sky over Elmsworth was unusually blue. Soft sunlight filtered through the trees lining Garden View Avenue, casting a gentle golden hue on the sidewalk like strands of delicate wool. In that sunlight, a young girl in a neat school uniform stepped off bus number 14, her left hand tightly gripped her backpack strap, while her right hand held a cream-colored envelope containing all her hopes and excitement for this afternoon. Ellie Summers had just turned 13. It was her first time going to the bank alone, not to withdraw money and certainly not to accompany her mother for anything serious. She was going to open a bank actual account, in her own name, with the first savings she had diligently collected over the past 3 years. This time, Mom will see that I'm grown up, Ellie whispered to herself, a small smile forming on her lips. She had prepared for this moment for a long time. From researching bank accounts suitable for minors, carefully reading the required documents, to practicing how to speak politely and confidently with a bank employee. Every night after school, Ellie would open her laptop and jot down notes in her notebook. Bring a copy of birth certificate. Bring grandma's birthday card. Don't forget the old savings booklet from the kids' bank. That cream-colored envelope held $800, mostly birthday money sent from her grandmother in Texas, plus scholarship bonuses, Lunar New Year gifts, and a handful of coins earned from helping her mother clean the house every week. To Ellie, that money was a treasure. Ellie's family lived in a modest 2-story house by Oak Ridge Lake, where fiery red maple trees blazed in the fall and wild ducks quacked every morning. To outsiders, they seemed like a typical middle-class family, simple, reserved, unassuming. Ellie always took the city bus to school. During the holidays, she, like her friends, made handmade cards for teachers, no expensive gifts or flashy items. She always thought of her family as enough, stable, not needing anything more. But Ellie had no idea her mother, Charlotte Rivera, was actually the CEO of Global Future Investments, a financial conglomerate holding controlling shares in several major banks across the United States, including South Shore Federal Bank. Very place Ellie was about to enter. Charlotte had never shared the truth about her job beyond vague words. I work in finance. She never flaunted wealth, let alone her power. They lived simply, like any other family. Charlotte told her daughter, "If you know you have everything from the start, you'll never learn to appreciate anything." And Ellie believed her as she stepped through the bank's automatic glass doors. Ellie felt her heart beat a little faster. The faint scent of the air conditioning, the sound of papers rustling and keyboards clicking, the soft chime of the bank bell from somewhere in the distance, it all made her feel very grown up. She paused for a moment to compose herself, then walked straight to the information desk. "Good afternoon, ma'am. I'd like to open a bank account for minors," Ellie said, a small smile on her lips. The bank clerk looked at her a little strangely. That gaze made Ellie feel a bit uneasy. But she stood tall, placed the envelope on the counter, and carefully pulled out all the documents from her backpack: birth certificate, student verification letter from school, report card, old children's savings book, and even a birthday card with her grandmother's shaky handwriting. "For my beloved Ellie, the strong and independent girl I'm proud of." Ellie lifted her chin, the smile still on her face. "I've prepared everything. This is my birthday money." She believed that if she was polite, well-prepared, and spoke clearly, people would respect her. She believed in what her mother always taught: kindness will take you further than anything else. And at that moment, Ellie could never have imagined that this very belief was about to face the harshest test of her life. The receptionist, with wavy hair and round glasses, glanced at Ellie over the rim of her spectacles. The name tag on her chest read, Brenda M. Her first look wasn't a welcoming smile. It felt more like a silent, cold assessment taunt. Not at all friendly. Brenda crossed her arms, standing still for a few seconds as if waiting for someone more important to walk through the door. But when she saw Ellie still standing there, a 13-year-old girl with tan skin, a neat but modest school uniform, Brenda raised an eyebrow slightly. "What are you here for?" Her voice was clipped, not exactly harsh, but enough to make one feel unwelcome. Ellie was taken aback. This wasn't how she had imagined her first real banking experience. But she kept her smile, trying to remain gentle. I'd like to open a savings account for minors. I have all the necessary documents and money prepared." Brenda cast a quick glance at the stack of papers in Ellie's hands, then stopped at the envelope of cash. Her expression suddenly changed from annoyed to clearly suspicious. She bent down, opened a drawer, and pulled out an appointment slip. "The bank doesn't process accounts for minors without a parent present. You should go home and ask your mother to come with you," Brenda said, without even glancing at any of Ellie's documents. "No, I actually called ahead. They told me I just needed a birth certificate, school verification, and proof of financial means." Ellie said softly, a bit confused. "I also have a letter from my guardian, if needed." Brenda gave a dry, sarcastic smile and shook her head. "Kids like you with $800 in cash, you think the bank is just going to believe that?" Ellie blinked. "Kids like me?" She didn't understand. "That's my birthday money from my grandmother, and savings I've collected over 3 years." "Right? A birthday from your rich grandma." Brenda emphasized the words with mockery. "I've seen plenty of cases, savings from petty thefts or little online scams. You think I'm that naive?" Ellie felt her nose sting. It was the first time anyone had ever spoken to her like that. All her life, people praised her for being polite, hardworking, and well-behaved. Teachers called her the pride of the school. Her friends trusted her as the perfect class president. But here, in the vast space of the bank, something made her feel small and suspicious just because she was carrying cash and had brown skin. "I really just want to follow the procedure," Ellie said, her voice beginning to tremble. "I've been preparing for this. This is my grandmother's letter, with the birthday card. She sent me the money so I could learn how to manage it." Brenda didn't even look. She crossed her arms and glanced at a nearby colleague before speaking loudly enough for nearby customers to hear. "We've got a suspicious case at the reception desk. Call the branch manager down. This girl's carrying a large amount of cash with no guardian, and her behavior is concerning." Ellie felt her heart drop out of her chest. Concerning behavior. She was just standing there, not shouting, not doing anything wrong. Why was this happening? Some customers nearby started looking her way. A few whispered things to each other. Some looked at her with pity. But no one stepped up to ask if she was okay. To them, Ellie was just a small problem, not someone in need of help. 5 minutes later, a tall woman in a navy blue suit appeared. She approached with a stern expression, her sharp gaze sweeping over Ellie like it was marking her with a giant question mark. "Are you the one carrying this cash?" the woman asked, voice low and firm. "Yes, my name is Ellie Summers. I'm Linda Carver, manager of this branch," the woman said. "You know, it's very unusual for a child to be carrying hundreds of dollars in cash, especially when there's no adult with them." Ellie bit her lip. She felt like everything she had prepared for weeks had suddenly become meaningless. "I just wanted to open an account," she said, voice choked. "I didn't do anything wrong. I just wanted my mom to know I'm grown up." Linda frowned. "Being grown up doesn't mean causing a disturbance at a bank. And I have no obligation to believe any story about a grandmother's birthday gift." Ellie reached into her backpack and took out her phone. "Please, may I call my mom? She has an account here. She can verify everything." But Linda raised a hand, stopping her. "No, it's too late now. I'll have to call the police. This might be a case of identity fraud or money laundering involving a minor." Ellie's legs felt rooted to the ground. She couldn't breathe. Not because she feared the police, but because she simply couldn't understand how adults could be this cruel when all she wanted was to do the right thing. In that moment, Ellie realized that sometimes a single look could trap a person inside prejudice no matter how hard they tried. And now, she had only one thing left to do: send a message. Ellie stood frozen at the service counter, lips pressed tightly together to keep a sob from escaping around her. The usual bank sounds continued: keyboard clicks, the clatter of printers, adults conversing about finances. But to Ellie, it all felt muted under a heavy fog of confusion and heartbreak. As if everything she had believed that if she tried hard, was polite and honest, people would respect her had shattered into 100 pieces. She had never been rejected by an adult before, never been looked at with suspicion, never been spoken to with phrases like "kids like you" or described as possibly dangerous. Yet today, in a modern, clean, upscale bank, she had become a suspect in everyone's eyes, all because she was a brown-skinned child. Standing alone with an envelope of money, Linda Carver had turned away, walking toward her desk phone. Her voice was sharp and firm. "Yes. I need a police unit to South Shore Federal Bank Helmsworth Central Branch. We have a suspicious case: a minor carrying a large amount of cash, refusing to leave, and without a guardian." Ellie shuddered. The police? She had never once been involved in any sort of trouble. She was a class president, the school library monitor, a top student 3 years in a row. She had come here just to open a bank account like anyone else. Her eyes burned, not from fear of the police, but from humiliation. She felt like the entire bank was watching her. Yet no one came to her side. No one asked if she was okay. Some eyes looked momentarily confused. Others looked away. Ellie bit her lip hard, holding back tears. And then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. The last small act of a child trying to hold on to one final thread connecting her to a fair world. Her fingers trembled. But she quickly typed each word. "Mom, I'm at South Shore Bank. They don't believe me. They say I stole the money. They're calling the police. I'm scared, Mom." A simple message. But for Ellie, it was the loudest cry for help in her life. She pressed send. And when her phone lit up with message sent, she exhaled a small breath, as if that alone meant Mom would know. Mom would come. Mom would believe her. Less than 6 kilometers away, in a 30-story glass tower by Elmsworth Bay, a woman stood before a large presentation screen, holding a remote. Her voice calm but full of command. "We don't just invest with capital, we invest with trust. And I don't bet on markets. I bet on people." That woman was Charlotte Riveras, CEO of Global Future Investments. She wore a refined charcoal gray suit. Her black hair was neatly tied back. Her face was sharp yet composed. In the boardroom, nearly 10 investors and financial executives listened attentively. Big numbers, growth charts, everything revolved around Charlotte, a woman who could shift millions of dollars with a single decision at that exact moment. Her phone gently vibrate on the screen. A cue. The name lit up. Ellie, emergency, only a custom setting. Charlotte had made for her daughter messages that would bypass all silent modes. Charlotte's brow furrowed slightly. Her hand froze mid-dash presentation. She opened the message, and her world built on logic, discipline, and controls suddenly tilted. Mom, I'm at South Shore Bank. They don't believe me. They say I stole the money. They're calling the police. I'm scared, Mom. Her eyes darkened instantly. No one in the room dared breathe. The woman who had just been leading million-dollar investment deals now fell completely silent. Slowly, she set the remote down on the table, looked around the room, and said, "The meeting is over." "What happened, Ms. Rivera?" one of the investors asked, clearly worried. Charlotte straightened, her eyes looking out the window where in the far distance the bank branch could be seen, the place where her daughter was now being misunderstood. Her voice dropped, cold and razor-sharp. "My daughter, 13-year-old child, has just been accused of stealing money at a bank where my family owns 40% of the shares." No one dared say another word. Charlotte stepped out of the boardroom, already dialing non-stop. "Robert, get the car. I need to be at South Shore immediately." "David, contact legal. I want a lawyer present before the police can even touch my daughter. Call the chairman of the bank's board. I want to know who the branch manager is. And I want a full report of all CCTV footage immediately." The elevator doors closed behind Charlotte Rivera. And in that moment, a storm was forming, not loud, not chaotic, but a storm in the form of a mother with power in her hands and fury in her heart. Ellie sat down on a plastic chair in the corner of the small waiting room, near the reception desk where the fluorescent lights cast a cold, pale glow over her face. The envelope of money, the stack of documents, the birthday card, the savings booklet, all lay scattered on the table. But no one cared about them. No one even bothered to look, except her Brenda, the receptionist, with that contemptuous glare, was now standing behind the desk with her arms crossed, occasionally glancing over at Ellie as if watching over a suspect. Linda Carver, branch manager, had just finished calling the police and was calmly jotting notes into her ledger, as though she'd just handled a petty nuisance in her day. Ellie didn't cry, or rather she had no tears left to cry. The shame, pain, hurt, and sense of betrayal by a society she once believed to be fair. They didn't come all at once, but layered slow and heavy. Like winter rain seeping into every thread of fabric. A middle-aged woman walked by and saw the small girl curled up in the corner. She paused and asked curiously, "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Before Ellie could answer, Linda stepped in from behind, voice cold and dismissive. "She's waiting for the police. There are concerns over a large sum of cash with unclear origins." The woman froze, nodded slightly, and walked away. No one asked Ellie the truth. No one asked, "Do you need help?" She remembered that morning before leaving the house. Her mother had placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "You've prepared everything carefully. Just be confident and polite. People will see that you're responsible." And yet now, she sat in the corner of a bank, not a responsible young person, but a child being treated like a criminal just because she carried cash and had brown skin. What hurt Ellie more than being suspected was that no one even wanted to believe her. From the very first moment, she clutched her phone tightly. The message had been sent. No reply from her mother yet. Okay, but Ellie knew her mom would come. She just didn't know if it would be in time. Linda returned after the call. Her face was expressionless, cold, but in her eyes flickered a hint of satisfaction. The kind of look someone gives when they believe they've stopped a dangerous scam. "Little girl," Linda said, "I don't know what school you go to or what your mother does, but I know one thing for sure. 13-year-olds don't just show up with $800 in cash and a perfectly rehearsed story." Ellie looked up, eyes red, but her voice was still steady. "I go to Elmsworth International School. My mom is a financial manager. I left the school letter here. And this money is from my grandmother. This is her birthday card. If you'd like, I can call my mom." It's one phone call. Linda waved her hand, as if sweeping away all reason. "No, we're not calling anyone. When the police arrive, they'll handle it according to procedure." Brenda chimed in. "I've seen plenty of tricks posing as parents, faking documents, laundering money from God knows where. Kids like you think people are easy to fool? Kids like you." It was the second time Ellie had heard that phrase. Today, the first was from Brenda. The second repeated, and this time from someone in power. Something inside Ellie cracked, not a sob, but the sound of trust breaking. A young bank employee walked past, his eyes briefly meeting Ellie's. He paused slightly, but Linda glanced at him. Kenny simply gave a faint nod and kept walking. No one dared take Ellie's side. It seemed that once prejudice had spoken the first word, every other voice was drowned. Ellie lowered her head and took out the birthday card from her grandmother, placing it in front of her. The card was a soft shade of blue, with a lavender flower on it, the same flower her grandmother used to grow in the backyard. Every summer, the writing inside had smudged slightly from Ellie's. "Sweaty hands, my dear. I know you will grow up to be kind and capable. But if one day the world stops believing in you, remember I believe in you, and so does your mother." Just then, the bank's glass doors opened. A gentle breeze swept through, and at that exact moment, the sharp, determined sound of high heels echoed from the entrance. Each step hurried, firm, and crisp, striking the marble floor like the beat of a gavel. Ellie looked up. Her eyes lit up. Mom had arrived. The atmosphere in the main hall of South Shore Federal Bank remained calm as usual. Customers arriving later continued to queue. Tellers continued their work, but at counter number 4, where Ellie still stood with tears streaking her face, time seemed to compress into a suffocating stillness. The police hadn't arrived yet. Linda Carver, the branch manager, was still on the phone, describing a suspicious incident with the confident tone of someone well-versed in passing judgment. Brenda, the first receptionist, stood behind her desk, arms crossed, wearing a smug expression, as though waiting for applause for having raised the alarm just in time. And in that space, Ellie could only cling to her phone, as if waiting for a miracle. She didn't know if her mother would make it in time. All she knew was she had never needed her more than this moment. 17 minutes after the message was sent, a sleek black SUV pulled up quietly in front of the bank. The door opened. Charlotte Rivera stepped out. No one in the bank noticed at first until she pushed through the glass doors and walked in. She didn't have to raise her voice, didn't have to shout. It's just the way she stood, bright, wearing a tailored black suit that was simple but razor-sharp, with a piercing gaze that swept across the lobby, was enough to bring an odd stillness to the room. Robert, the head of GFI's private security, walked a few steps behind her, eyes scanning the space. And just behind him, David, Charlotte's personal attorney, held a slim file folder, prepared for any legal response required. Charlotte didn't ask which counter. She scanned the room and saw her daughter. Ellie stood curled in on herself, hugging her backpack to her chest, eyes swollen red. Their eyes met. Ellie didn't cry out, didn't burst into tears. Just a soft, quiet breath, like a breeze through an open window. She had endured long enough, and now she knew her mother was here. Charlotte walked straight to the counter and stood face to face with Linda Carver. She didn't look at Brenda, didn't glance around. Only Linda, the woman who had dared call her daughter a fraud. "Who are you?" Linda frowned, annoyed. "Please return to the reception area. This is a serious matter. The police will be here shortly." Charlotte didn't respond immediately. She placed a business card on the counter. No frills, no fancy logo. Just a few lines in embossed gold. Charlotte Rivera, Chief Executive Officer, Global Future Investments, Strategic Shareholder, South Shore Federal Holding. Linda picked up the card. She blinked, then looked at Ellie, then back at Charlotte. And in that instant, Linda understood. She realized the woman standing in front of her wasn't just an angry parent. She was someone who held the fate of Linda's directorship in her hands. Charlotte met her gaze. Her voice calm but unyielding. "You called the police on my daughter without checking her documents, without verifying any information, without calling the parent even after the child asked you to." Linda stammered, trying to keep her composure. "I was just following anti-fraud protocol." The child carried a large amount of cash and had no guardian. David, the attorney, stepped forward and opened the folder. "This is the policy document for minor accounts from South Shore Bank itself. It clearly states that accounts may be opened with proper identification and a letter from a parent. This girl brought everything. We also have video footage of the entire interaction, including verbal mistreatment and refusal to review documents." Linda's face turned pale. Brenda backed away, avoiding everyone's gaze. Ellie stood beside her mother, her small hand clutching the edge of Charlotte's suit jacket. "Mom, I tried to prove I did everything right." Her voice trembled. Charlotte placed a hand gently on her daughter's head, brushing her hair back. Her voice was calm, unwavering. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You did nothing wrong. They did." A few customers began whispering. Some quietly pulled out their phones to record. The atmosphere shifted from indifference to unease. From apathy to unease and stirrings of shame. Charlotte turned to Linda again. "I'm not asking for an apology. I'm demanding an explanation. In writing. To the Board of Shareholders at South Shore Holding." Linda tried to recover. "Ms. Rivera, I had no idea the girl was your daughter." Charlotte cut her off, her eyes sharpening. "And what if she wasn't my daughter? What if she was just a normal girl, no power? No family name then today, you would have destroyed a child's trust because of your prejudice." Linda had no words left. Sweat formed on her brow. Every excuse died on her tongue. And Charlotte stood there steadfast, like a mountain dot. Just then, the bank doors opened. 2 police officers stepped in, 1 man, 1 woman. They had been called based on Linda's report, but instead of finding a case of juvenile fraud, they were met with a very different scene. A 13-year-old girl standing quietly beside her mother. A high-ranking executive with an ice-cold expression. A lawyer and a security officer taking notes. And a branch manager beginning to tremble. The officers hadn't even asked a question before. Charlotte turned to them. "Thank you for coming, but it seems Ms. Carver has made a grave error in judgment. My daughter is not a suspect. She is the victim." And with that sentence, the entire game changed. The 2 police officers stood frozen at the door, their eyes scanning the tense room. The man, middle-aged, broad-shouldered, named Carl Brenner, glanced at Ellie, then turned toward the woman in the sharp black suit standing opposite the bank management. Her icy composure made him shiver slightly. The female officer, Rebecca Young, had sharp eyes, her hand resting near her shoulder radio, ready for any situation. But unlike other emergency calls they had responded to before, the atmosphere here was different. There was no shouting, no one trying to flee. only a small girl pressed close to her mother, and a woman whose very presence felt like she could bring down the entire bank with a few words. "Excuse me? Who made the call to the police?" Officer Brenner asked, his tone measured and cautious. Linda Carver cleared her throat, trying to regain a sense of authority. "I'm the branch manager. I reported a possible case of money laundering involving a minor. This child brought in a large amount of cash without a guardian and was being uncooperative." Charlotte turned to the officers, her voice soft but sharp as a blade. "My daughter Ellie Summers, 13 years old, came here to open an account using birthday money and legal savings. She brought all necessary documents, a letter from her school, and a handwritten card from her grandmother. Instead of being assisted, she was insulted, threatened, and then had the police called on her without anyone verifying a single piece of information, all because she has brown skin and wasn't accompanied by an adult." Rebecca frowned. She turned to Ellie. "Do you have your documents with you, sweetheart?" Ellie nodded and pulled a carefully prepared folder from her backpack. One by one, she laid out the contents on the desk like presenting evidence in a courtroom. Her birth certificate, her student ID from Elmsworth International School, a note from her homeroom teacher allowing early dismissal, children's savings booklet issued by this very bank 3 years ago, and finally, a light blue birthday card with trembling handwriting. "To my dear Ellie, never be afraid to be independent, because you're stronger than you think." Rebecca picked up the card and read it slowly. Brenner examined each document meticulously, his expression growing more serious. Charlotte remained silent, not rushing, not pressing. She knew the truth speaks for itself. "Manager Carver," Rebecca said, her voice steady but clearly firm. "You stated you reviewed these documents before calling us." Linda hesitated, then stammered, I thought the situation was unclear." And the girl didn't provide a convincing explanation. David, Charlotte's attorney, interjected. "May I clarify? The refusal to verify, the baseless accusations, and the decision to contact law enforcement without any criminal conduct are all clear signs of discrimination based on racial and age-related prejudice." Brenner and Rebecca exchanged glances. Neither said it aloud, but both sensed this was no longer a simple case. Brenner scratched his head, then looked at Ellie. His voice softened. "Your name is Ellie, right?" The girl nodded, her eyes still puffy and red. "You didn't do anything wrong. Carrying cash is not illegal. Thank you for cooperating." He paused, then turned to Charlotte. "Ms. Rivera, I don't believe we need to proceed with the original report. I sincerely apologize for the unnecessary distress caused." Charlotte nodded slightly, but said nothing. She didn't need polite apologies. What she needed was for the system to look straight into its own failure. Rebecca had already pulled out her notebook and begun taking statements. "We'll file a full report. This matter will be investigated further, especially if there's evidence of discriminatory conduct or a breach of customer service protocol." Linda began to sweat as the two officers stepped away. Behind their promise of an honest report, the air in the bank turned ice cold. Employees whispered behind the counters. Some customers still stood watching Charlotte and Ellie, a few nodding quietly with sympathy. Charlotte turned to Linda one last time, her voice low. "Do you know what hurts a child the most?" Linda remained silent. "It's not being rejected. It's being doubted even when they try to do everything right." "My daughter did nothing wrong," she continued. "You didn't know who she was. Fine, but you should have known she was someone." Linda lowered her head. For the first time, she didn't argue back. Charlotte turned to Ellie and took her hand. "Let's go home." Ellie looked up at her mother. The fear faded. In her eyes, Charlotte was no longer just the strict mom who always came home late for meetings. She was someone who could stop the entire world just to protect her. As the two walked out of the bank, the evening light glinted through the glass doors and shimmered across the marble floor. A little girl had entered, full of excitement, and walked out with a lesson far too early about the adult world, but she didn't walk out. Alone, the SUV glided smoothly through the streets of Elmsworth, heading toward a quiet lakeside neighborhood. Inside the car, no one spoke. Ellie rested her head on her mother's shoulder, eyes wide open, yet seemingly not focused on anything. The late afternoon sun filtered through the windows, bathing her face in a soft orange glow, but it couldn't warm the emptiness inside her. Charlotte remained composed, but her hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual. Each time she recalled the fear in Ellie's eyes when she walked into the bank. Her chest tightened painfully. She had once thought that keeping her daughter away from the vortex of power, money, and society's biases was enough to protect her. But today she understood. Silence is also a way to let wrongness continue. That evening, after Ellie had gone to sleep, Charlotte sat alone in the small library of their home. The room was paneled in dark wood, lit by warm yellow light, so quiet that the ticking of the wall clock could be clearly heard. On the desk was an internal report from South Shore Federal, sent to her by David, her lawyer. A thick packet, heavily marked with red tabs, complaints related to service toward young customers, minorities, and unjustified emergency calls. One note made Charlotte freeze. In the past 14 months, Elmsworth's Central Branch has made 23 police calls involving customers under 18 of whom were people of color. Charlotte sat motionless. Ellie wasn't the first child, but she might be the first whose mother had the power to do something about it. She let out a soft sigh. Then, I have to act. The next morning, at the headquarters of South Shore Holdingware, the largest shareholders met every quarter. Guest arrived without an appointment. Charlotte Rivera walked into the executive boardroom. No advance notice, no assistant, but no one dared turn her away. The woman placed a document bag on the table and looked straight at Mr. Donald Keene, the chairman of the board. "We need to talk," she said calmly, "about how this bank is treating the next generation of its customers." Before Donald could respond, Charlotte opened the folder and pulled out security footage from the Elmsworth branch gathered by David. They watched together. Not just the footage of Ellie being turned away, but other clips too. Young people being detained without reason, suspicious glances, the disparity in treatment between white and minority customers. No excuses were spoken. Charlotte closed the folder. "I'm not asking for anyone to be fired. I'm demanding change." 3 days later, an internal announcement was sent across the entire South Shore federal system. The company will conduct a comprehensive review of policies regarding service for minors and minority customers. A special advisory committee will be formed to oversee fairness in reception and handling procedures. And the one appointed to lead that committee, none other than Charlotte Rivera. Not just as a shareholder, but as a mother. That same afternoon, Charlotte and Ellie took a walk by the lake, something they hadn't done in a long time. The sunlight shimmered gently on the water, the trees casting calm, sweeping shadows. "Mom," Ellie finally spoke after a long silence, "will this all just go away someday?" Charlotte didn't answer right away. She sat down on an old wooden bench and pulled Ellie down beside her. Her hand gently clasped her daughter's. "No, sweetheart. Some things shouldn't go away," she said slowly. "Because if we let them go, they'll come back, worse and hurt the ones who don't have a voice to fight back." Ellie lowered her head, her voice barely a breath. "What about the other kids? They don't have moms like you." Charlotte looked out over the lake. A breeze stirred, carrying the scent of damp grass and fresh water. "That's exactly why I have to do more than protect just you. I have to protect the ones whose names I'll never know." That night, Charlotte reopened a personal laptop she hadn't used in a long time. She began typing the first lines of a new initiative titled Youth First, Respecting the Rights of Young Customers, a project aimed at building a new standard for serving minor customers at banks. It would include not only staff training and process reform, but also regular dialogue sessions with teens, so they could speak about how they feel when they enter a financial institution. Something that may seem small, but carries enormous weight, and this was only the beginning. Asterisk. The following week passed with quiet but undeniable shifts like the surface of a lake that seemed still, while beneath it, the currents were beginning to change course. A memorandum from South Shore Federal's executive board was sent to the entire banking system nationwide, starting next month. All frontline staff will participate in the training program Understand, Respect, Guide, serving minor and vulnerable customers. This wasn't just a few hours of token theory. Each session included role play with real-world scenarios, dialogues with real customers who had experienced discrimination, and most notably, an open discussion session centered on one story: Ellie. Summers, a customer turned away by prejudice. Charlotte didn't speak much to the media or press. She declined all interview invitations. But what she did, every action, every document, every policy quietly sparked far more impact than any public statement could. She didn't just want the bank to correct a mistake. She wanted to ensure that mistake never happened again. In another part of the story, Ellie was walking her own path in the days following the incident. She didn't return to school immediately. Her mother didn't pressure her. It was Ellie who asked for a few days off, not to hide, but to truly understand what had happened. She spent her mornings in the home library, reading books about civil rights, laws protecting minors, and the stories of people who had once been crushed by bias, and how they had stood back up. She was no longer the little girl who believed that being good and smart would always earn you fairness. Ellie had grown, not in age, but in awareness. On a softly rainy afternoon, Charlotte stepped into Ellie's room carrying a thin stack of papers. Ellie was sitting at her desk, writing in a brown leather notebook, the same journal she'd kept since 4th grade. "What are you writing?" Charlotte asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. Ellie looked up, hesitant. "I'm writing what I felt at the bank, and the things I wish people understood." Charlotte was silent for a moment. Then she placed the folder on Ellie's desk. "Then, I think there's a place that really needs what you're writing." 3 weeks later, at South Shore's internal conference in Portland, where more than 300 branch managers gathered from across the state, a surprise guest stepped onto the stage. Not an expert, not a professional trainer, but a girl in a white shirt, a soft blue sweater, wide, bright eyes, holding a neatly typed speech. Ellie Summers. At first, the room murmured with surprise. But as Ellie began to speak, her voice low, clear, and slightly trembling, no one dared look away. "I don't remember who said it first. I remember exactly how it felt when I heard it. Kids like you, where would you get legal money from?" I had prepared everything: documents, savings, hope. But no one looked at that. They looked at my skin color, my age, and filled in the rest themselves. I know I was lucky, because my mom could stand up for me. But not every kid has a mom like that. So if you're listening to me today, I'm asking for just one thing: don't judge someone too quickly, especially if you've never spent a single day in their shoes. No one at the conference said a word. No one clapped out of obligation. They simply fell silent, because what Ellie said needed no embellishment. No rhetoric was the truth they could no longer look away from. After the speech, the head of human resources for the bank approached Ellie and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you," she said. "You helped us adults remember something we had forgotten." A few weeks later, a new guidebook was distributed across South Shore's branches, titled, "Hello, Young One, a Guide to Serving Customers Under 18 with Trust and Respect." The opening page, a direct quote from Ellie's speech, no one doubted. Now that a 13-year-old girl once turned away simply for carrying $800 had done something that many adults spent a lifetime avoiding. One evening, while Charlotte worked late in the reading room, Ellie softly opened the door. Holding an envelope, "Mom, someone sent this to me," she said. Placing it on the desk, Charlotte picked it up and opened it. Inside was a simple card and a handwritten line, "I'm sorry, Ellie. I was wrong. And because of you, I understand now. Brenda." Charlotte folded the card, her eyes softening, and Alicia simply smiled. Not because she had forgiven, but because she understood that true change doesn't come from anger. It comes from the courage to speak up for what's right even when your voice still trembles. June, the city of Elmsworth entered its wildflower season. Along the maple-lined streets, clusters of blooming lavender spilled past white wooden fences, swaying gently in the breeze. Each morning, the chirping birds and scent of new sunlight seemed to soften, just a little, the injustice that had torn through a little girl not long ago. Ellie had returned to school. No one mocked her. No one looked at her with curiosity. On the contrary, her classmates gave her a quiet kind of respect. Someone gently left a note on her desk, "You're really brave." Someone else left a sticker shaped like a shield that read, "Defend what's right." She wasn't famous, but she had become a quiet example, and that made Ellie feel grateful. One afternoon, after class, her homeroom teacher, Ms. Maggie, called Ellie to the office. "I have an invitation for you," she said excitedly. "The city's youth center is hosting a young citizens forum. They want you to be one of the 3 guest speakers." Ellie was stunned. "Me?" "Yes." Ms. Maggie smiled. "They want you to share your experience at the band camp. What made you choose to speak up instead of staying silent?" Ellie was quiet for a moment, then nodded softly. "I'll do it." She wasn't sure if she was a good speaker, but she knew this: some stories, if not told, would simply fade into silence. And she didn't want her pain to mean nothing. That day, Ellie stood on the stage of a small auditorium at the City Cultural Center. In the audience sat hundreds of students from different schools, diverse in color, background, and experience. The yellow spotlight bathed Ellie's face. She no longer trembled like she did at the banking conference. She had changed, not because of recognition, but because of the understanding that had taken root deep in her heart. That day, Ellie began. "I had prepared everything except one thing, being prepared to be doubted just for being myself." She told her story, not dramatic, not embellished, just a steady stream of emotion, like how wounds become scars, not loud, but enduring. "After what happened, I didn't just want respect. I wanted every other kid, whether or not they had a mom who is a CEO or a private lawyer, to be treated fairly, because no one, especially a child, should have to prove they're innocent just to be believed." The auditorium erupted into applause, but Ellie simply bowed her head gently, then stepped off the stage like someone completing a small but deeply meaningful mission. A week later, Charlotte received a call from the State Department of Education. They wanted to invite her and Ellie to join a new project aimed at building a training model for teachers on identifying and addressing discrimination in schools and social settings. "We believe," the caller said, "that sometimes a real story is more powerful than 100 theoretical lectures." Charlotte turned to her daughter. Ellie didn't hesitate. She nodded. "I agree, but I want to share it with others too, with kids who've been through the same thing but haven't had the chance to tell their story." Charlotte smiled. In her eyes was something like pride, but also deep emotion. Ellie was no longer just her daughter. That little girl was becoming a voice not loud, not boastful, but sincere and stirring. Ellie's story began to spread beyond their small town. Schools in neighboring states started using it in civic education classes. A local TV station produced a feature titled "One Bank Account, One Wound, and One New Beginning." And South Shore Federal went even further. They launched the Youth Advocate program, the first of its kind nationwide, where minors are offered personalized services, trained mentors, and the right to file independent complaints. On the program's poster, there was no photo of Ellie, only a small white line on a purple background. Every child deserves to be trusted before being judged. That evening, after a long day, Charlotte and Ellie sat together on their porch. They sipped hot cocoa. Silently watching the moonlight reflect on the lake, Mom Ellie said softly, "Do you think if you hadn't arrived in time that day, I would have been taken away?" Charlotte gently squeezed her daughter's hand. "I think it's possible," she said honestly, "and that's why I can't stop at just arriving in time once." Ellie looked up at her. Her eyes shone brighter than the porch light. "I won't stop either." Charlotte smiled. No more words were needed, because in that gaze she saw the little girl who once trembled at a bank counter was now standing tall, not to fight someone, but to stand for those still afraid to lift their heads. On a summer morning, more than 2 months after the incident at the bank, Ellie sat alone in the corner of her backyard. Next to a blooming lavender bush, a white-painted wooden table stood beside her. Her speech draft opened, next to her brown leather diary and a glass of mint lemonade her mother had made. The breeze was light. The trees whispered gently. In the distance, the lake shimmered in the sunlight like a tilted mirror of the sky. Ellie was no longer the girl turned away at a bank counter. She was still 13, still a student, still journaling and making handmade cards. But now, within her was a young girl with firmer footing, someone who knew what mattered and what needed to be spoken aloud today. She was preparing for one final speech of the summer. Not at a grand conference, not on a lit stage, but at a small library on the outskirts of town where children from various backgrounds gathered for a Meet the Bank program relaunched by South Shore under new standards. They invited Ellie to speak, not for her name, but because people believed she would speak truthfully from the heart. At the library, the space was humble multicolored plastic chairs, a whiteboard, and piles of scribbled drawings. But to Ellie, it felt intimate. No pressure, no prejudice, just the curious eyes of 9, 10, and 11-year-olds sitting in neat rows, listening to a girl only a little older than them tell a story. "When I was your age," Ellie began, "I liked saving money. Every time I did something good, washed dishes, folded blankets, got a high grade, I'd put a little in a box with an owl on it. I called it my growing up box. One day, I saved up everything with my grandma's birthday card and went to the bank, thinking that if I prepared well and behaved properly, people would trust me." Ellie paused, looking into those wide, attentive eyes. "But they didn't trust me, because I was young, because I didn't come with an adult, and because I looked different from the customers they were used to. I once thought, maybe I should just stop going to banks. But my mom told me something I'll never forget. If you back down, silence will replace the truth. So I didn't stay silent. I spoke up, and someone listened." After the session, a boy came up to Ellie. He looked about 10, with curly hair and a t-shirt printed with a spaceship. "Ellie," he whispered, "last time I went to the bank with my mom, the lady wouldn't let her take money out because her English wasn't good. I was so mad, but I didn't know what to do." Ellie knelt down, speaking gently. "You can talk to your teacher or write a letter to the bank. You have a right. You don't have to wait until you're older to be respected." The boy nodded. lips pressed together as if storing away something important. That afternoon, Charlotte picked Ellie up. On the way home, she asked, "Tired, sweetheart?" Ellie shook her head and smiled faintly. "No, Mom, today I feel." Light Charlotte glanced at her daughter in the rearview mirror, eyes filled with quiet tenderness. It had been a long time since she saw Ellie as a child in need of protection. Now she saw her as a companion growing in her own way. That night, the two sat in their reading room, next to a small lamp and a stack of books from the weekend book fair. Charlotte read reports. Ellie opened her laptop to write an email. Subject: Line to Ms. Linda Carver, if you still remember me. The message was short, but enough. Today, I shared the bank story with younger kids. Not to accuse, but to remind them that every child has value and shouldn't stay silent when treated unfairly. I'm no longer angry at you, but I hope you understand that sometimes a single rejection doesn't just delay a transaction, it can break trust. She hit send, feeling light, not hoping for a reply, just hoping someone, somewhere, might pause before judging a child. That autumn, Ellie returned to the same South Shore Bank branch, not to make a transaction, but to join her mother in cutting the ribbon for the new children's customer service room where every staff member was trained to listen, guide, and never dismiss a growing dream, no matter how small. On the wall near the entrance hung a small frame, no name, no portrait. Just a simple line: every child carries a future. Welcome them as if that's true. And so, the story didn't end with a dramatic alarm bell, but with a quiet, steady change, like the first steps of a child stepping into the world, believing they deserve to be respected. And sometimes, all it takes is one person who believes in you enough to change the way the world sees you. Sometimes, a woman walks into a room not to demand justice with loud voices, but with the gaze of a mother carrying love, kindness, and the quiet power of truth. And sometimes, it only takes one moment of injustice for a 13-year-old girl to grow up not just with a wound, but with a purpose. Ellie didn't choose revenge. She chose to tell her story, so that the world might learn to treat children who carry the future with more care. If there was a moment in this story that made you pause, if you've ever been a child who wasn't believed, or if you simply want to help spread a little more kindness into the world, please like this video, subscribe to Snail Story Love, Slowly and Truly, and share this story with someone you love, because who knows, it might become a quiet anchor for someone right when they need it most. We'll see you in the next story, where wounds are healed with understanding and love comes gently, slowly and truly.